How does a submarine, pinned to the seafloor in 268 feet of water, leaking oil and air like a wounded animal, endure 17 hours of relentless depth charges from a skilled Japanese destroyer captain who knows exactly where she hides him then? Days later, turn the tables to sink an enemy ship before facing another 17 charges. In late 1944, during USS Tambor's 10th War Patrol in the East China Sea, Commander Benjamin C. Blakenbaker took the GA-2 class submarine deep. After torpedoing a target, the Japanese destroyer, likely a skilled skipper from a convoy escort locked on via the telltale oil slick and bubbling air, he made pass after pass, dropping pairs of depth charges each time. Explosions rocked the hull. Glass shattered, lights flickered out, fittings loosened, bilges flooded. The sub settled on the bottom, engines silent, crew holding breath in the dark to avoid detection. The destroyer circled methodically, dropping charges set to detonate at the right depth 30 seconds to sink in that water. Close blasts hammered the pressure hull. Men were thrown against bulkheads. Ears rang from concussions. Tambora stayed quiet for 17 grueling hours. Batteries draining, air growing foul, CO2 building until crew felt shortness of breath. Blakenbaker searched for the perfect trim, shifting water and weight inch by inch until the boat finally broke free from the mud without giving away her position. She slipped away, submerged, evading the hunter. 4 days later, Tambor found her revenge. Spotting the 2,700-ton passenger cargo ship Ranzan Maru in a convoy, she maneuvered into position at periscope depth. Torpedoes streaked out hits amidships, the ship listing, then sinking in flames. Escorts pounced immediately, dropping another 17 depth charges in a furious barrage. Tambor dove again, enduring the punishment, hull groaning but holding. She survived both attacks, limped back to Midway, and lived to fight on. In those dark hours, pinned to the bottom, with death passing overhead in rhythmic explosions, the crew faced terror no surface sailor can imagine. Silence, broken only by the distant thunder of charges, the hiss of leaks, the labored breathing in thinning air. Yet they yelled. The question burns: what keeps men steady when every blast could be the last? On Tambor's patrol, disciplined, training, and sheer refusal to die turned a hunted boat into a hunter again. The destroyer that cornered her failed. Tambor sank her prize and escaped twice. The event unfolded during the Pacific submarine campaign in 19... when U.S. Navy submarines like Tambor, a Gato-class boat commissioned in 1940, waged unrestricted warfare against Japanese shipping. BD-station American subs had become the primary weapon strangling Japan's supply lines, sinking tankers, freighters, and escorts vital for oil, food, and munitions. Tambor, already a veteran with multiple patrols, operated in the East China Sea, a dangerous area thick with convoys and aggressive escorts. Japanese anti-submarine warfare improved late in the war. Destroyers used active sonar ringing, lookouts for oil slicks or periscope wakes, and patterned depth charge attacks, often in pairs or salvos, from stern racks or throwers, Y-guns, K-guns. Charges were typically 220 to 300 pounds of explosives, set to detonate at preset depths via hydrostatic pistols. A skilled captain could hold a sub down for hours by staying overhead, forcing battery drain and air exhaustion. Tambora's ordeal came after an attack where she damaged or sank a target, leaving leaks that betrayed her position when she went deep. The destroyer pinpointed her on the bottom in 268 feet shallow, enough for charges to be effective but deep enough to test hull strength. Gato class tested to 300 feet. The 17-hour submersion was one of the longest survived by a U.S. sub under attack air foul. CO2 scrubbers working overtime. Crew passing out from exhaustion. Bleckenbaker's careful buoyancy adjustments freed her without broaching. 4 days later, Tambor intercepted a convoy and torpedoed the Ranza Marua. Typical Japanese merchant of the era, carrying troops or cargo, Mark 14 or Mark 18 torpedoes, steam or electric struck, sinking her quickly. Escorts destroyers, or Kaboken, counterattacked with another 17 charges. But Tambor evaded again, her hull battered but intact. This patrol highlighted U.S. submarine resilience. Gato-class boats had strong pressure hulls, high tensile steel, good battery endurance, and silent running when rigged. Crews trained rigorously for silent running, minimal machinery, no unnecessary movement. Survival often depended on luck charges detonating too far, and skill-evasive maneuvers like knifing the boat or using thermal layers. The importance lay in cumulative impact. Each escaped sub continued sinking tonnage, weakening Japan's economy. Tambor ended the war with credited sinkings. Her survival exemplified how American submariners, despite high losses, 52 boats sunk, outlasted hunters through better torpedoes after fixes, radar, and aggressive tactics. Japanese depth charges often set to shallow early on, but by 1944 escorts improved, making such long attacks more common. Understanding this context frames the personal ordeal. 80-plus men in a 312-foot steel tube, facing hours of terror, then striking back. It showed submarine warfare's brutal asymmetry. Hunter becomes hunted in minutes. Survival hinging on depth, silence, and nerve. Tambor's story, drawn from patrol reports and crew accounts, remains a record of endurance in the silent service, where one escape could mean more enemy ships sunk tomorrow. Tambor had already claimed several ships on her 10th patrol when the trouble began. At approximately 2 p.m. on a late 1944 afternoon in the East China Sea, the submarine, running submerged at periscope depth, spotted a small convoy 3 merchant ships, screened by a single destroyer. Commander Benjamin C. Bleckenbaker ordered the approach. At 3:15 p.m., Tambor fired a spread of 4 Mark 14 steam torpedoes from 1,200 yards to hit the lead freighter amidships. Explosions lit the sea, and the ship began listing heavily. The destroyer reacted instantly. She turned toward the torpedo wakes, increased speed, and began a sonar search. Tambor went deep 300 feet, near test depth for a Gato class, bat-rigged for silent running. Engines stopped. Ventilation secured, all non-essential machinery off. The crew moved slowly, spoke in whispers. Then the first depth charges fell. The destroyer made her first pass at 3:30 p.m. 2 charges detonated close, perhaps 50 yards astern. The boat shuddered, light bulbs shattered, cork insulation rained from overhead. Bilge alarms sounded. Leaks sprang in the after torpedo room. Oil began seeping from a cracked fuel tank, bubbling to the surface in a telltale slick. The destroyer's sonar operator pinged the contact-active Echo Rain in, locked on. For the next 17 hours, the attack continued without pause. The Japanese captain was skilled. He circled methodically, dropping pairs of charges every few minutes. Each salvo 2 220-pound depth bombs rolled off. Stern racks exploded at preset depths, the shock waves hammering the pressure hull like giant hammers. Close ones lifted the stern, slammed men against bulkheads. Glass gauges cracked. The hull groaned under compression. Water leaked steadily into the maneuvering room. Pumps ran on batteries to keep the boat from flooding. At around 5 p.m., the destroyer dropped a pattern that bracketed Tambor perfectly, charges exploding above, below, and to both sides. The boat settled hard on the muddy bottom at 268 feet, stuck fast. Oil continued to leak. Air escaped in small bubbles. The destroyer held station overhead, engines idling, listening. Every 20 to 30 minutes she made another run, dropping more charges. The crew counted them dozens, then scores. Batteries drained. Air grew thick with CO2. Men passed out from exhaustion and foul atmosphere. Black and Baker ordered. Weight shifts pumping water from one tank to another, trimming the boat, millimeter by millimeter. Around 7 a.m. the next morning, after 17 hours submerged, the boat finally broke free. A slight current helped. Careful flooding of forward tanks lifted the bow just enough. Tambora slipped off the bottom without broaching, creeping away at 2 knots on silent speed. The destroyer continued searching the original position, dropping occasional charges into empty water. Tambora dead surfacing at dusk to recharge batteries and ventilate. 4 days later, on a moonlit night, Tambor found her. At 10:45 p.m. she intercepted another convoy, 3 ships escorted by 2 destroyers. Black and Baker maneuvered into firing position at 1,000 yards. At 11:20 p.m. 4 torpedoes left the tubes. 2 slammed into the 2,700-ton passenger cargo ship. Runs and Maru hits in the engine room and forward hold. Flames erupted. The ship rolled, then sank by the bow within minutes. The escorts turned immediately. 1 destroyer raced toward the sinking ship's position. The other began a sonar sweep. Tambor dove 2,400 feet bien. Test depth rigged. Silent again. The first destroyer dropped 17 depth charges and rapid patterns close enough to shake rivets loose. Bend frames, flood compartments. Water poured through a cracked hatch. The after engine room took on several feet. Men manned hand pumps, bailing desperately. A near miss cracked the whole plating. Leaks sprayed in high-pressure streams. Blake and Baker ordered evasive turns hard left, then right, using the boat's momentum to slide under thermal layers that might bend sonar beams. The destroyer made 6 full runs, each dropping 4 to 6 charges. Explosions rattled teeth. The hull popped and creaked. After the 17th charge detonated astern, the attacks tapered. The escorts circled the sinking wreck, searching for confirmation of the kill. Tambor crept away slowly, staying deep until dawn. Heroics appeared in the small, sustained acts. The diving officer maintained trim under impossible conditions. The engineering officer kept 1 shaft turning on minimal power. A torpedoman in the afterroom held a leaking gland with his hands for hours to slow flooding. Losses were light, no fatalities, but the boat suffered severe damage. Bent periscope shears, cracked battery cells, flooded compartments, reduced speed. Technology defined the fight. Gato-class submarines had a 312-foot pressure hull of high-tensile steel, tested to 300 feet but capable of more in extremis. Mark 14 torpedoes, after fixes 2 exploders and depth settings, proved reliable. Japanese depth charges Type 95 models were effective, but often set to shallow early in patrols. By 1944, escorts adjusted better. Sonar Japanese Type 93 active pinned Tambor via oil and air leaks, but thermal layers and bottom mud helped evasion. Twists emerged in the endurance. The first 17-hour ordeal should have ended Tambor mosts. Subs could not stay down that long without surfacing or dying from asphyxiation. Yet careful management and a fortunate bottom release saved her. The second attack came when the boat was already damaged. Leaks worsened. Batteries weaker, making survival even less likely. The climax stretched across the second depth charge attack. At 11:45 p.m., after Rons and Maru sank, the lead destroyer closed fast. Her first pattern 6 charges exploded in a ring around Tambor's estimated position. The boat rolled violently. Men were thrown to the deck. Black and Baker ordered all stop, then right full rudder to swing under the destroyer's wake. The second salvo detonated closer, perhaps 40 yards, cracking the conning tower fairwater and flooding the pump room. For the next hour, the destroyer made run after run. Charges 7 through 17 fell in disciplined pattern, stern racks first, then throwers lobbing mark to charges 50 yards to port and starboard. Each explosion sent shockwaves through the hull. Lights flickered. The inclinometer swung wildly. A near miss buckled a fuel tank. More oil leaked. marking the surface again. The crew remained silent, breathing shallowly, passing out from CO2 buildup. One man collapsed at his station. Another revived him with oxygen from a spare bottle. At the 17th charge detonating close enough to bend frames, Tabor took the worst hit. The after torpedo room flooded to knee depth. Pumps strained. Black and Baker ordered a slow turn to starboard, using the boat's slight way to slide into a layer of colder water. The thermal gradient bent the destroyer's sonar pings. Contacts faded. The Japanese captain searched for another hour, dropping occasional single charges, but the trail went cold. Tambor crept away at 100 feet, then 200, staying below periscope depths until the escorts withdrew to protect remaining ships. She surfaced at 4 a.m., ventilated the boat, and limped toward Midway at reduced speed. Repairs were makeshift welds on cracked plates. Pumps running constantly. The boat reached port days later, battered but intact. Resolution came in, survival, and continued service. Tambora underwent repairs at Pearl Harbor, then returned to patrol. She ended the war with credited sinkings, totaling over 40,000 tons. The destroyer that hunted her twice failed both times. Tambora outlasted the attacks, sank her target, and lived to fight again. The lesson was hard-earned. In submarine warfare, endurance often decides victory. Pinned for 17 hours, leaking and suffocating, the crew held silence and trim. 4 days later, damaged and hunted again, they struck back, then endured another 17 charges. Survival demanded not bold charges, but patience waiting out the hunter, using depth and silence as weapons. It showed the fragility of steel under pressure and the strength of men inside it. One wrong move noise, a pump starting to sun could end everything. Yet discipline turned the hunted into the hunter. Tambor did not win by outgunning the destroyer. She won by outlasting him, then striking when opportunity returned. The sea closed over the wrecks. The war moved on. But for those 80 men in the dark, those 34 hours of charges became a measure of what human will can endure when escape seems impossible. In the end, the sub that should have died twice lived, and the hunter sailed away empty-handed. USS Tambor limped into Midway Atoll after her 10th patrol. Hull scarred and leaking, crew exhausted but alive. Repairs took weeks, welded cracks, replaced bent frames, overhauled pumps and batteries. She returned to sea, completing 12 war patrols total before the Japanese surrender in August 1945. Tambor earned 11 battle stars, credited with sinking over 40,000 tons of enemy shipping. She decommissioned in 1945, served Pustora as a training hulk, then was sold for scrap in 1972. Her conning tower, insignia snarling, Tiger became legend among sub. The men who endured those 34 hours of depth charges carried the memories forever. Ears rang 4 years from concussions. Nightmares replayed the slow tick of charges falling, the groan of steel under pressure, the taste of foul air. Some spoke little of it. Others wrote quiet accounts in patrol logs or family letters. Commander Blake and Baker received the Navy Cross for his leadership during the ordeal, keeping the boat silent, the crew steady, the escape possible. The crew received commendations, but the real reward was survival itself. The East China Sea swallowed the Rexrans in Maru, and the unseen casualties from those charges. The war ended. Convoys stopped. Depth charges fell silent, yet Tambor's story lingered in submarine lore. Proof that a boat, pushed beyond limits, could still strike back and live to tell it. The lesson etched deepest was endurance under impossible pressure. Submarine warfare stripped everything to essentials: silence, trim, breath. When pinned for 17 hours, when hunted again after a kill, victory came not from firepower alone, but from refusing to break. One wrong sound, one hasty move, and the sea would claim them. Instead, discipline held. The hunter failed twice. The hunted survived twice. In the dark, 300 feet down, with explosions ringing overhead, those men learned what steel and will could withstand. Tambor did not win the war single-handedly. but she helped strangle Japan's lifelines. Her survival became a quiet testament, even when the bottom claims. Even when the hunter circles, there is still a way to slip free on strike again. I've just said what's recorded in history. You should find out the real truth yourself. We have written the sources from which we got this story in the description of this video, and we have always been and will be supporters of the oppressed, regardless of their color, race, or country. This world and its creator are also with the oppressed. Like this video if tales of silent courage under the sea move you. Comment below what do you think kept Tambor's crew going through those endless hours. Subscribe and hit the bell for more forgotten WWII stories of men, machines, and the sea's unforgiving depths. See you in the next one.